Hello, 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 and welcome to Drawing on Shakespeare, number 3. And there's a glorious picture of Austin on the screen at the moment. Austin, where are you now?
Sorry. I thought I was on. Am I there? Yes, no, here I am.
It's a vast improvement, I have to say.
It's so good to see. Oh, shoot. I guess I don't need this on anymore, do I?
We're told to keep 2 meters apart. I think the Atlantic is a bit more than 2 meters. We're probably okay.
That's true. It's true. I'm just so used to wearing it now. It seems like a nice thing. I love your Shakespeare shirt.
Thank you very much. It's just a picture of the man himself, and I'm rather yours is somewhat more colourful than mine.
Well, this is drawn by Larda Souza, a Canadian artist and a cartoonist who draws a lot of our posters for the Reduced Shakespeare Company shows. He designed this, put it out on Spoonflower. Oh, and also this is a design too by an artist in LA named John Matta. He calls it "Where's Mike Pence?" There he is.
Fantastic.
Anyway, it's important to support artists during this time.
Definitely.
What are we talking about today, Gary?
Today we are talking about clowns.
Well, and this is good, and we're making a little change from the way we've done it in the past 2 weeks, and we have invited to join us the biggest clown I know, Reed Martin, my partner with the Reduced Shakespeare Company, is joining us any second now. But we invited Reed to join us because not only is he a Shakespearean, but Reed, you're an actual clown, or you were. Is it once a clown, always a clown? Are you Reformed, Orthodox?
I don't think one can escape it. Once it's happened, it's on your permanent record. I attended Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey Clown College in 1987, and then spent 1988 and 1989 on the Ringling Brothers Red Unit, touring to, I forget how many, 87 cities and towns and villages across the U.S. and every venue from Madison Square Garden and the White House and the Superdome down to the Oklahoma State Fair.
Wait, there was a clown in the White House? Surely. What?
Insert your own punchline here.
And the one we have now is wearing more makeup than you ever did.
True.
Can we prove that with a photo at this point, do you think? Should we do that?
I'm sure. Here's a picture of Reed in all of his glory. I mean, look at that. Why is that not your actual headshot, Reed?
I never got any work. when I send that in, nobody hires me. Basically, I get cease and desist orders.
Or by the time you went to clown college, you had performed some Shakespeare clowns, right? You were already a professional actor. You'd gotten your MFA in acting. What was any part of doing Shakespeare part of your reason to go be an actual circus clown?
Well, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I'd had all that classical training and had done quite a bit of Shakespeare before I joined the circus. So there's kind of 2 parts to this answer. I'd seen, and I don't know if you saw this, Austin, or not, a production of Comedy of Errors at Lincoln Center with the Flying Karamazov brothers and Avner the Eccentric, directed by Robert Woodruff.
That's right.
And so I saw that. I think I had finished my classical training, but had not yet joined the circus. And that was just, oh my gosh, this is great. And so, yes, I had done... Let's see, my first professional job was also my first Shakespeare I was ever in. I was in Cymbeline at Cal Shakes, and I played, Yes, My Noble Liege. I did the Scottish play at PCPA, playing the Scottish doctor. And then at San Diego, I did Love's Labour's Lost at UC San Diego in graduate school, played Constable Dull. That's one of those comedies.
The appropriately named Constable Dull.
There's all these clowns in that show who are not actually funny. I guess it's potential. Don Armato, I think, can be funny, but
I've played Costard.
Yes,
in that one. We set it in Edwardian, and I played him as an Irish gamekeeper. And
was it funny? Was the show funny?
Do you know, it actually wasn't too bad. I mean, we cut out a lot. We made it funny by cutting out some of the jokes and making the characters kind of funny, and just, it's those little things with the business, isn't it? It's finding the business, and which is, one of the big differences, I guess, between clowns and fools, which is something I think we'll probably come on to. about where the comedy comes from in the characters.
I find Love's Labours is such an interesting play too, because it's literally about language. It's every single character is wrangling with words and how they are used to woo and flatter and fight, and they're talking about the definitions of words, and it's a slog if you linger on any of that stuff.
Yeah, and I mean Holofernes does half his jokes in Latin, which is kind of a lot of them hit the floor straight away.
Well, and here's a question: have you been inspired? Learned from Chuck Jones, the great animator, the great physical comedian Chuck Jones.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things that's really important. I mean, I'm very lucky, I think, working in animation. Physicality and physical timing is something that I understand. And applying that sort of thing when you're playing a fool or a clown or something like that is really helpful, because you're not just relying on the words, you're relying on every single bit of the physicality. And I think that's really important.
Well, Chuck Jones taught at Ringling Brothers, Barnum, and Bailey Clown College.
You're kidding, that's amazing.
Circus clowns think of themselves as ideally living cartoons. Now, we can't run off a cliff, pedal in the air for 5 seconds, and then stretch our bodies and then fall to the ground. But if we could, we would like to.
Amazing, amazing.
That's very cool. Well, and I remember, Reed, you've said before in interviews that you thought you were funny verbally, but not necessarily funny physically. And this whole, all the clown college training had to give you this entirely new vocabulary, comedy vocabulary, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was a struggling actor in New York, thinking, how am I different from anybody else? Yes, and I'd finished graduate school and thought, we didn't learn verbal comedy, but I just come from a funny family in both senses, and so I knew that Penn Jillette of Penn and Teller had gone to clown college. I know that Bill Irwin, the famous stage clown and actor, had gone to clown college. So I went to learn physical comedy. Yeah, how can I tell a story physically? How can I make people laugh physically as much as I can verbally? And so you do study Chuck Jones, you study Laurel and Hardy, you study Keaton and Chaplin and Harold Lloyd.
One of you mentioned, I forget which one, mentioned the distinctions between clowns and fools. Shakespeare has fools, but a fool is a job title. The clowns that I think that we're talking about are roughly the mechanicals, or sometimes sometimes Polonius, the advisor.
Usually low life, but not always lowborn. Sometimes, as you say, like Polonius can almost be thought. I mean, the official clown in that is technically the gravedigger. The gravediggers are classed as the clowns in Hamlet, but and Yorick, but he's a fool. But Polonius, can often be played for laughs and then becomes the clown. Yeah, there is this distinction. The fool is the person. The biggest thing is the fool is usually the person who is making verbal jokes and is a licensed wordsmith and fool, and the clown is the person who's funny by nature of their personality and is usually put upon by other characters as well. And there was also the thing, wasn't there, where we've talked about this before, where Shakespeare used to write for his company, and he had in the company Will Kemp, who was the clown, and he was the one who used to do the funny dancing and used to do all the silly improvising, they believe, and stuff like that. Then when he left and Armin took over, Armin was a singer and a wordsmith, and that's when the clowns went out and the fools came in.
Yeah, I think of the characters not defined in the script as clowns and fools generally. I think of Falstaff, I think of Polonius. Our Shakespeare teacher in grad school was Eric Christmas, who was classically trained in England and came over, and he did Polonius at the Old Globe, which I didn't see, but we did a student workshop production of Hamlet, and he was not at all above giving a line reading, and you could see how brilliant he was at Polonius. I also was very fortunate. I think Richard III can be hilarious if done right. It makes it even more evil.
Oh, yeah,
and
absolutely.
Paxton Whitehead, who was the first replacement in Beyond the Fringe, played Richard III that I was in at the Old Globe Theater in San Diego, directed by John Houseman. And Paxton Whitehead was hilarious. Well, you don't think of Richard III as a clown, but he's a very, very funny character if played that way.
Brilliant.
I was just in that reading of King John, and I played Cardinal Pandolf, the Catholic representative. And one of the many failures of that play is that it doesn't really have a clown. And Cardinal Pandolf is maybe the closest you get to one. Certainly the way I played him.
I always think the tragedy plays better if there's a little break in it, even if it's just the drunken porter in the Scottish play. That's not a play with a lot of humor.
Yeah.
But,
and again, that is, and again, one of those things that a lot of the time these days, because the porter's jokes are sort of contemporary jokes and plays on words that we don't get. So often they cast somebody funny to kind of improvise that scene, don't they? And make modern equivalents of it, which works to a greater or lesser extent depending on who they've cast, I think. Sometimes it can be excruciating when they try to sort of go off script. Sometimes it works. But yeah.
Who are you drawing now? Who are these guys?
I'm being slightly self-indulgent, and I have played Dogberry twice. And I'm drawing my 2 Dogberrys that I've played, who, again, people are very torn about Dogberry. I love Dogberry. I mean, I love Much Ado. I think we're both Much Ado fans anyway, aren't we, Austin? But I just love Dogberry. And I have seen some terrible ones, but I think it's one of my favorite clown characters.
I asked my wife, Dee, just before we started, who's your favorite Shakespeare clown? And she went, oh, Dogberry. But she's played Dogberry, so she knows how funny Dogberry can be. Gary, tell us about the production you did of Dogberry, where you gave him a sort of a backstory. It sounds very intriguing.
The one I'm drawing at the moment on the right. But we felt we wanted to ground it in some sort of backstory. So we decided that at some point in the past, he'd been in a war with Leonato and had saved Leonato's life at some point in this war. But in doing so, had received a kind of head wound or something that affected his brain, which is why he gets all the words wrong. And this is why Leonato keeps this inept fool on, because he owes him a sort of debt. And he's kind of nice to him, even though he gets short with him a few times. He then sort of goes, you stay around, have a drink, and all that sort of thing. And you think, why is he just not saying you're fired? And it was like, well, they must have this history. So we gave him this history for the reason he couldn't, form a coherent sentence, a bit like me this evening. And we made Verges like his minder. So although it's this little guy that usually he's being rude to, he was actually caring for him and looking after him. A massive imposition on what Shakespeare, I'm sure it's exactly what he intended, obviously, but it felt valid.
Well, it's a great motto in life: give dignity to idiots.
Well, yes. I think you see some of these supposedly comic characters and give dignity to them. I think sometimes directors and actors don't have them take the characters and what they want and what they're doing seriously, right?
Yeah.
I just had a student do the Lance, My Dog Crab speech, and he played it so seriously. It was hilarious. But sometimes people feel like, oh, the language is archaic and people aren't going to get this, so I've got to play it like this. And to me, that only makes it worse.
I think the more seriously the clown takes themselves, the funnier they are. The clown doesn't. A clown doesn't know he's funny. A fool does.
That's good.
Well, that's a great way to say that. Yeah, you can see the strain and the effort on some actors going, "Oh crap, I'm the clown. I've got to be funny all the time."
Yeah.
You don't. No, you don't. Things. Reed, how would you think how do you think both Shakespeare's clowns and your circus clown training influences the stuff we do with the Reduced Shakespeare Company?
I mean, I hope when people see us do our Shakespeare-themed shows that we give them a moment. We certainly try to in each show where they say, oh, they aren't doing this because they can't do it seriously. They're doing it silly because they choose to, right? So I think it gives it legitimacy instead of, oh, they're just screwing around because they can't do it any other way. And I think that makes people relax when they feel like we're in control of the material and could do it whichever way we want. And the clowning I think it goes back even to, predating you and me in Reduced Shakespeare Company, when the RSC started at Renaissance fairs with a big crowd. The acoustics were not good. There was always a physical comedy element to the show to keep people interested. And I think what Clown College gave me as much as anything is a big bag of physical comedy tricks to keep people interested. And it's like our style of new vaudeville. So, we can be funny verbally, we can be funny physically. And I think people aren't as sophisticated. I mean, we think of physical humor as not sophisticated. It can be sophisticated, but I think people are not, nowadays, maybe even less so than in the olden days. They're just not used to seeing physical humor as much as telling a joke, right? Most people are able to tell a joke. Most people aren't able to take a slap, right? Yeah. And so I think physical humor, I think people find delightful, and they don't see physical humor, I think, as much as they hear verbal humor on a day-to-day basis. And I think people delight in it.
And of course, going back, I mean, clowning, I mean, you can sort of explain this as well, can't you? Is the origin of the slapstick.
Yeah, I think supposedly Joseph Grimaldi, was credited with inventing the slapstick. I don't know that that's true. It seems like it must go back to Greek or Roman days. But yeah, it was 2 pieces of wood on a hinge, and you'd swing it back, and then you'd stop it, and it would hit. And we use that in several shows, an actual slapstick, and that's where the term comes from, slapstick humor.
Well, that's Sir John, is it not?
That is a bit of a Sir John, yeah. I thought it's loosely based, I think, on the sort of the Orson Welles Chimes at Midnight version of Sir John, I would imagine. Yeah, sometimes you see your full staff played very dark, and it's fine, but I think you're missing a trick. I think there is so much comedy that then you gain the darker, sadder moments later if you've played him for the laughs that are there earlier on. I love it.
Have you seen a production of Midsummer where the laughs were more with the lovers than with the mechanicals?
Yes.
And was that good or bad?
You go first, Austin, because I've seen a couple actually.
Well, is it good or bad? I think it's all to the good. I mean, my complaint about Midsummer is that the lovers are rarely as funny as they should be. But for instance, the week that we're recording this, on Thursday, June 25th, the National Theater at Home is dropping its production for free onto YouTube of The Bridge Dream. And that's a production of Midsummer where the lovers are funny. And I did hear some people complaining about in The Bridge Dream that, well, the Pyramus and Thisbe, the mechanicals, weren't as funny as I expected them to be, which I took as a compliment because it meant the whole show was funny up until that point. Typically Pyramus and Thisbe is a great relief because finally we've reached the funny part.
But what they were they were wonderfully earnest, weren't they, instead, which was great. They would like this company just trying really hard, and it wasn't sort of suddenly laughs for laughs' sake. The laughs they had in that scene totally came from the characters they developed all the way through. There was the Globe production that was on at the same time as the Bridge one. The mechanicals were all female and were very funny. One of the funniest wall gags, in fact, I'll draw a wall in a minute. There was a very funny gag with the chink in the wall, which was good. I've just drawn Lance and Crab here from Two Gentlemen of the Road.
I love that. That's a bigger crab than I'm used to seeing.
It was one I saw a production years ago at the Swan that had a very young Hugh Bonneville playing one of the young lovers in it, and the guy, this was based on that, and he had like his big Irish wolfhound as Crab that just stood there and totally stole the show, of course, naturally.
What the hell are you drawing there? Good. Oh, I see. All right, never mind.
This is how they did Wall in the Globe one. She wore like a white all-in-one bodysuit, and the chink in the wall was a tube that she put between her legs, and they had to walk through.
Oh dear.
It was very funny. They did a thing in that which was interesting, and from a clowning point of view, I mean, you might find interesting, was they and it was a genuine, not a plant, they would get a member of the audience up to be Starveling and to play Moonshine, and they would put them up there and give them the script and make them do all sorts of stuff.
I love that. That's a little
great.
Little reduced Shakespearean.
Yes.
It really is. Well, yeah, now that's interesting. When we bring the audience up, we are the audience is not the clowns. We're the clowns.
I always try to make the audience look good, but I think of Completely Hollywood Abridged, where we pull somebody up to read this big speech consisting completely of movie titles, right? We hand them the script and say, So, and it's funny. And then we also script in there that their ad-libs are scripted within the script that we hand them. I'm never sitting so close to the stage again. Get ready to applaud because this is my last line. This is love. Actually, yeah.
Yeah. Woo-hoo. Yes. Well, that's the important thing, is making the audience members look good.
You know, we have moments where we are improvising where we are absolutely not improvising at all. There are moments where we do improvise and we get people go, oh, I was there the night you forgot your lines. You know, during the fight, you and Matt Croak were having that fight and he forgot his lines. And we're always torn to say, well, actually, we accidentally forget our lines absolutely every performance at that moment.
Dee and I talk about this all the time too, because she's an improviser and is so good at it. And I am not an improviser, although I improvise sometimes. And you know, the improviser's art is to make it up in the moment and look as if it was absolutely planned. And the actor's art is to take something that's scripted and rehearsed carefully and make it absolutely look like it was improvised and is happening right at that very moment.
Oh, wow. That's good. I like that. That's write that down if you haven't done already.
Yeah. Well, Will Nighy says, you know, the skill of making it look like this thought is only just occurring to you at this moment, when in fact it's completely memorized and planned.
While we've been chatting, I've just been scribbling something that I think it'd be worth just discussing briefly. Female clowns. Female character clowns. Officially, according to the scripts, it isn't really written in. Clown, and then a female character comes in, I don't think. However, I would argue the nurse in Romeo and Juliet could be considered a clown, possibly. Audrey, maybe, in As You Like It.
I mean, one of the great things now is that women are playing these clown characters too, and being just as funny, if not more funny. Yeah. It changes the status of things. Like when I've directed Dogberry twice, and she's been a woman each time. That makes a kind of a sense of the line, "I'm the prettiest piece of flesh of any in Messina."
I was just going to say about cutting and that sort of thing. I'm completely in favor of that, cutting and updating. I think if Shakespeare, if he were working today, he wouldn't want to leave in obscure references that nobody's going to get. And I'm sure he updated his plays as they did it. That's why there's different versions, and people who say, oh, the received text from when Shakespeare wrote it. One, people aren't used to sitting that long. Why are we making jokes that 90% of the audience isn't going to get? It seems to me so in the spirit of Shakespeare, the showman, to cut and update. I don't know why that's not universally agreed.
I completely agree. And, you know, I mean, I love and respect and worship at the altar of Shakespeare as much as the next geek, but I have absolutely no problem whatsoever with irreverence towards it as well.
And I'm not sure what the virtue is in completeness either. You know, I mean, it feels like that this attitude is becoming more prevalent, or at least people are talking about it more. You know, I see, as much as I love the Globe productions, many of them, you know, to give everything equal weight and time and emphasis is to, all right, it's a tribute to Shakespeare, but it doesn't help the moment. I'm not sure how you're helping the show, because not everything can be equal. Not everything should be equal. And it often feels like, well, we're being paid by the word here, or we're being paid by the hour. Like Shakespeare wrote like Dickens, he was being paid by the word. You go, no, Will, baby, cut.
Does it seem to you that the comedies have this issue more than the tragedies? I have a feeling like there's a lot of contemporary jokes from Shakespeare's time in the comedies, and I don't feel like there's so many references in the histories and tragedies that are quite like that.
Well, my sense is with the comedies, he was throwing everything at the wall and seeing what worked, and a lot of it did back then. And I think what you said is that he would be cutting and changing if he were around to cut and change. We're doing that with our Reduced Shakespeare Company scripts. You know, some jokes just don't work because nobody knows who Cato Kalin is anymore. You know, but some of them don't work because they're sort of racist and sexist in ways that aren't funny anymore. Maybe they never were funny, but at least they're certainly, we can't get away with them anymore. And so having to update the scripts and just change and update things, I think, is absolutely something Shakespeare would have been doing
there is nothing wrong with helping your audience understand what you're talking about. That seems to be fairly fundamental, I'd have thought. Yeah.
Well, right, and without having to say, oh, well, you should have read the glossary. Who is this now?
This is Dr. Caius. This is the funny Frenchman. I thought he often, I mean, there's that thing, isn't there, that Shakespeare, he loved his sort of racial stereotypes. I mean, in Henry V, you've got the comedy scene with the four captains, the Englishman, the Irishman, the Scotsman, and the Welshman. Which is the first Englishman, Irishman, a Scotsman, and a Welshman walk into a trench, you know, and it's kind of like they all play to their national stereotype, and it's funny, but it is that I think they are kind of clowns. I think they are there's your clowns in Henry V there, you know. You've got Bardolph and that lot, but they're not actually that funny, except in that one in the bit just after that. But the clown bit really does come from the fighting between the Scotsman and the Irishman and the Welshman.
Yeah, it's funny. Reed, you were saying about the history plays don't seem to have that many those kinds of references. I think they do, but they're not jokes. They're references to, well, and as you know, in this great battle that the Romans fought, blah, 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 or that my ancestor fought over here.
So they don't say it and then go.
I think we're coming to the end now. So in honor of our special guest, I'm going to do Constable Dull.
In the definitive Reed Martin performance.
Definitive. I don't know what period did you set it in actually, Reed? When you played Dull, can you remember? Because in pretty much both versions that I've been in of Love's Labours, it was Edwardian, so he looked like your classic British Bobby of that period.
No, ours was set earlier. I think ours was set maybe in the early 1800s.
So let's do him
Regency.
I'll do him as a Bow Street runner. That's what I shall do. I shall do Dull as a Bow Street runner. There we go. Okay.
Well, and they did it when the great production of Love's Labours that I saw at the Folger Theater in Washington, D.C. It was so funny and so fast, and it all took place in not just a library, but an immaculate recreation of the Folger Reading Room, which is on the other side of the building. And so every character in here was had some sort of relation to a library. So Holofernes was he was a professor and a scholar, and I forget who Holofernes's opposite is. But anyway, she was a kind of a
Sir Nathaniel. Sir Nathaniel. It's the vicar.
That's right. Yes, she was Miss Nathaniel, the spinster librarian.
Yeah,
and they had a little a flirtation that was so funny and adorable. And Constable Dull was a sort of one of the night watchmen, one of the guards at the Folger.
Brilliant.
Nice. And it was terrific. It was such a great production, and it moved lickety split. They didn't linger on any of the ancient Latin puns that nobody gets anyway.
I do think that is one of the big secrets with Shakespeare, and especially comedy, is just keep it going.
I say that all the time when I'm directing shows, not just Shakespeare comedies. You know what they call a slow comedy? A tragedy or a drama. I'm going to put you two on the spot. First, because I have an idea what my answer is. So what's the funniest performance by an actor, male or female, that comes to mind that you've seen on screen or live? The one that comes to mind for me was in the very first Shakespeare I ever did, Cymbeline, at Cal Shakes. And the character is Iachimo, who is sort of a comic version of Iago a little bit. And he's trying to prove that he's been, with the guy's wife, and he hides in a trunk in her bedroom.
Yes.
It was played by Robert Sicular in this production, who's a great Bay Area and Ashland, Oregon actor. And there was a trap under the stage, so you could see them carry in the trunk and set it down. And then in the ensuing moments, he comes up and crawls into it. And then they go to the next scene, and he opens the trunk, and we planted an actor or a crew member to hiss, and then the whole audience would begin to hiss. So Iachimo he'd be asleep in the bed, and he'd come out of the trunk, and everybody would go, "Sss," and his first line is, "The crickets sing, and man's o'er labored," and it was just he was just brilliant, and he reveled in it. And then back into the trunk, and the scene ends. And then in the next scene, somebody comes in and kicks over the trunk, and there's a gasp, but he's gone out the trap, and so the trunk is empty. But it was Robert Tichenor's Giacomo, I think, is one of my all-time favorite comic performances.
Wow, that's talk about put on the spot. Pierce Quigley, who played Falstaff in the recent Globe and is also Bottom in the Midsummer Night's Dream from a few years ago, can deliver lines so funny. He can floor you. But he was even funny as Bernardo on the battlements in Hamlet. I mean, he's just one of these guys that can make anything funny. He's brilliant. The lad, and I've totally forgotten his name, and I apologise to him, who is in the Bridge Dream playing Bottom, is sublimely, beautifully funny in the sweetest way you've ever seen. And years ago, I saw Christopher Luscombe play Dogberry. As a very timid, very camp Dogberry, always adjusting his hair like this when he was talking and being very, and it was just, I mean, I was crying with laughter. He was so funny because it was totally unexpected. I think that's what made it really funny. Apart from that, Chris Luscombe is terrific. It was unexpected because you have expectations of Dogberry to be this blustering character. But suddenly you had this little guy going, "It's all our you know, are you all here? Is it sufficient?" and all this sort of thing. And he was nervous, and it was lovely.
Well, and tagging on to what you said about the Bridge Dream, is the actor Oliver Chris, who plays Oberon and Theseus in the Bridge Dream. His Orsino, I thought, was the funniest thing of that recent Twelfth Night.
Yeah.
I've never seen an Orsino be as funny, and he had me laughing just at line deliveries. Oliver Chris did. In my production of Twelfth Night, my Toby and my Andrew were hysterically funny, but they're supposed to be. The ones that surprised me and delighted me were my Viola and Olivia, who were both funny individually and then funny together. And I'll just say that you mentioned Chris Luscombe. He's a friend of the pod. He's been a guest on the RSC Reduced Shakespeare Company podcast. He's such a nice guy and a really great director, in addition to being apparently a really great actor.
Yeah, amazing. Well,
did you finish your doll?
Yes, I did.
The likeness is incredible. It looks just like me.
It looks just like W.C. Fields.
Yes.
And on that note, Reed, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. This has been a blast. I had a great time.
Cool. Excellent. Lovely.
And we'll see you next time, where we'll be talking about, I don't know.
Something else. Something to do with Shakespeare.
Something else.
Brilliant.
Bye, everybody.